So continuing on our journey, we're literally on a journey with the people of Israel. We're going to see that as we move into the wanderings portion, they've spent a year at Sinai, and if you look at the map, they've had the Exodus story through the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, down to Mount Sinai. They receive the first part of the law here. Then they build the tabernacle. They have the massive failure called the golden calf incident. And as a response to the failure of the priesthood, God will then give them a priestly manual. We call that priestly manual Leviticus. The priests have failed. Here comes more law. What's the purpose of the law? That they might be cleansed and made holy so that they could walk with God, that God might dwell with them and be their people. And as we begin the wanderings part, we're going to see them now leaving Mount Sinai. But before you depart, they first have to prepare to depart. And we're on page 57 in the Panorama book. Page 57, we see the outline of the book of Numbers, and here it is for you. Now, I'll say, if you've ever read Numbers, the book of Numbers is an unfortunate name in English. That's the tradition of the Greek understanding of the name of this book. The Hebrew name for the book of Numbers is basically in the wilderness. That's the name of this book. It's in the wilderness as they're wandering out in the wilderness. And the very first part of this in the wilderness book of Numbers is pretty excruciating reading, not gonna lie. So it's pretty boring. You get a long census, then you are told how many people there are, and we have some debate as to how we should take the number 1,000 in that section. Is it 2 million? Is it way less? We're not exactly sure. And then we get the arrangement of the camp, and this is really important. If you turn the page, you can see on page 58, because of the failure of Israel, now they're not a kingdom of priests, they're a kingdom with priests. So the people have priests who now represent them because the people have consistently failed to trust Yahweh. Now, the Levites are the ones closest. They're the priestly line. They'll be the ones close to the tabernacle, and the people will be scattered around that. It's a tragic note. They were invited to be a kingdom of priests, but now they're a kingdom with priests, and those priests will represent them to Yahweh. And that's what's going on as they're giving all the different order and where the people camp and all that stuff, and it's kind of boring. Now, we note, just because all reading is not equally interesting, it doesn't mean that it's not equally important. So let me give an example. Your mortgage statement, the thing you sign if you bought a house, that is really not interesting reading. It's excruciating reading, unless you like that kind of thing. It's not nearly as fun as a novel or your favorite story that you're reading. But that mortgage statement, that mortgage document is really, really important, right? And in the Bible, we have to acknowledge there are more and less interesting and fun reading, but it's all really, really important. That's what's going on here in this book of Numbers as they give the different places where they're going to camp. So that's prepare to depart, then they depart. In the second year, this is page 58, letter B, in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, and the people of Israel set out. Here they go, they're leaving. And so we pick up our story. They now leave the wilderness of Sinai, and they're making their way up to Israel, and we're going to have this key moment, this moment of truth. They stop at a place called Kadesh Barnea, and they stop there, and what they decide to do is, let's send in 12 spies into the land. They're going to go spy out the land, and why 12? Because there's 12 tribes, so let's make sure we send a representative from each tribe in. They're going to go spy out the land, and they're going to come back and tell us what's going on in there. Tell us, hey, what's the land like? Is it a nice land? Is it good? What's Yahweh doing? Where's He taking us? How hard is this going to be to defeat them? And look at what happens. They send the 12 spies in, and when they return, 10 of the spies say, we cannot defeat the people in that land. We absolutely cannot defeat them. They're too strong, they're too powerful. Now keep in mind, these same people a year earlier experienced God defeating the most powerful army in the world of Egypt, and here they are going, we can't go into Canaan. The people are too numerous for us. They're too strong for us. In fact, the reason they're afraid is they look in and they say, there's some really tall people in there. They're like really tall. How could we defeat them? Sure, God delivered us from Egypt, but we can't beat these tall dudes. What are we going to do? Two of the spies, their names are Joshua and Caleb, they say, Yahweh will deliver us. Yahweh will be victorious. Trust Him. Who do you think they go with? They listen to the majority instead of the minority. And it's just worth noting, sometimes what the majority want to do is not the right way to go. Sometimes what everybody else thinks is the right plan or the good plan or what culture says is the way things must be done, sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, that is completely wrong. Oftentimes it is the minority voice that says, trust Yahweh, even against the culture, that we have to listen to. And that's what we see take place in this rebellion at Kadesh Barnea. As a result of that, look at letter D, Numbers 14, verse 34. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, they went in 40 days and spied. Now they'll get a year for each day. And God says, you will bear your iniquity 40 years. As a result of their failure to trust God at Kadesh Barnea, they will now wander around the wilderness for 40 years. And I always just stop at this point and remind myself, imagine if you are one of these people. You remember that failure. You would go around the same territory over and over and over again. Imagine going by the same river 3 years that 3 years earlier you went by and going, I think we've been here before. We are lost. We're going in circles. And all of that misery is supposed to remind this generation, we did not trust Yahweh. Remember, we keep saying it over and over and over again. The Torah, the law of God, the law of Moses, these first 5 books, these are not a list of rules trying to show you how you can earn your way to heaven. That's not what this is. This is a trust book trying to instruct you and I on what it looks like to trust Yahweh. And they find themselves finally, our story will end. They wander and wander and wander until finally they are told, as the last of that generation dies, to make their way to the plains of Moab, which is on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And it's there on the plains of Moab that Moses will deliver his final sermon to the people. It's called Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means second law. Moses gives his final law, and this is to the next generation of Israel. The children of that generation that died in the wilderness, he now retells the same story and retells a lot of the same laws so that they will hear, this is what it looks like to trust Yahweh. Trust and obey Him. Hear His word. Listen to Him. Love Him with all of your heart, soul, and strength, and it will go well for you. This is Moses' long sermon called Deuteronomy that he delivers to the next generation of Israel. And our story of redemption and wanderings ends right there on the plains of Moab.